Thin Blue Line, and the other one was Joe Berlinger's Paradise Lost. And I had never seen a documentary before that, and I was just so blown away by what these two men, not just, because I loved movies as a kid and as a young adult, but just seeing like this documentary form, like it just blew my mind, and what they were able to do in these documentaries and exonerate these people and show us that the narrative that we were told by the media and by the justice system were not the real stories. So I saw these two men as like great heroes, and there was really nothing I wanted to do besides that, and I've never wanted to do anything else besides make documentary films. There's so much to answer to what you're asking. First of all stories come from real life, pretty much. So why not just cut out the let's just go to the source, real life. There's no better stories than real stories. And then you have in storytelling, you got protagonists and antagonists, and I think what I like to play with, that's an ongoing theme, is just the role of the protagonist and the role of the antagonist. And you're in the process of watching Portrayal right now, so I'm not going to tell you about it, but really just like bending that, sort of using the assumptions that people have towards a protagonist and an antagonist. And I always love, like, I'm a big Scorsese fan. I love and Paul Schrader. Like, I love the anti-hero, the person who we're rooting for, but maybe is not necessarily the best person. And I think, like all of us, we're all flawed individuals, and that's what's a great thing about documentary filmmaking, is you really get to focus on our flaws of humanity, and that in itself is good storytelling. And with that, I do like to approach documentaries as narratives. I like to tell a story. I like to follow the arcs of narrative storytelling. I started an aspiring scriptwriter, so I sort of keep that the nature of script writing and the revealing of a story in my documentaries. And I get accused a lot of, even by like the broadcasters that I work with, of like sort of bending the truth. But it's not. I think just people aren't used to this more cinematic way of telling documentary, because it doesn't have to be like a handheld camera. Like we can tell as polished of a story as any narrative film. Well, because it's a story that mostly is derived from our protagonist Roman, it didn't necessarily need that much research at the time. Like, part of the process of the filmmaking was we were researching and learning about it as we went along, and there was only so much I could do because it was a discovery process for Roman. It was more about just making contact with the artist. That was the sort of the big with Oz Almog. That was the sort of the big feat, to not only find him, which he was very hard to find online. Most of his stuff was scrubbed from being online, so there's really nothing you can find about him. And then convincing him to be in the film. And then it became a process of just following Roman on his journey as this story that has haunted him his whole life, trying to untangle the web that of like what's real, what's not real, what stories that you learn when you're a child, but like didn't necessarily make sense because maybe you distorted them a little bit. And then also the stories that Oz has told about his work. I don't want to give too much of it away. But, well, what the film is about him, and being told the story about his grandfather by the multiple people in his life. And now as an adult, like retracing a story that nobody wants to talk about. So, the one thing that we know is that we're all unreliable narrators of our lives and of history. And so this unreliable narration that has shaped a lot of Roman's beliefs about his grandfather, he confronts the people who have this. So So yeah, so the portraits are more this piece of work that Almog has done about his about Jewish people, and like he's painted 2,000 portraits. So it's also finding the places that exhibited this portrait because they don't necessarily know the real story behind these portraits. So there was a lot of withholding a lot of information from a lot of people as we were trying to tell the story without them really knowing what we knew, and they didn't really suspect much because nobody knew this big secret about these paintings. I'd said like the main thing about filmmaking is just being able to relate to people and be able to like hack their brains and their experience. That's a great second question because the second thing is access. Like you can't pitch a film without access. You can't be like, oh, I want to make a story about the torso killer, and not have any access to the torso killer. So like that is obviously the most important part of documentary filmmaking is who you have access to. That will make a project or not make a project. That will, your access is how you sell a project. So with this, I was actually just brought in by, it was just this serendipitous thing. Like a childhood friend of mine runs that nursing home, and she'd asked me to come in to take portraits. And I was just so blown away by what I saw there, and my interaction with photographing, spending some time with these patients on the memory ward, who all were suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia. I was like, I started to like film a little bit. And then once I realized I had something there, how interesting this would be, I just moved in. I moved in for 2 months. And it was one of the only films that I've made where I was like everything. I was the sound guy, the camera guy. I just did everything and I just lived with these people. And then, back to my earlier point of like hacking brains, like, can you imagine the difficulty in like hacking a brain that has dementia? And, there's such an interesting thing because I think there's a scene in the film. I'm not sure if it's apparent. Haven't seen it in a while, but I have them talking like nonstop. I'm like in their worlds. I'm a very familiar part of them. But then when you see their children visit, they're just very quiet. And the children are just asking questions over and over again, and they're not really saying much. And then when the children got to see the film, they were just blown away because they'd never had conversations like this with their parents since their parents became ill. And so it was just an interesting insight into Alzheimer's and dementia of like the skills that a documentary filmmaker has in order to deal with everybody and how to get everybody to talk really does um, come into handy when you're dealing with people who have dementia. And I considered having like a workshop, like start doing a workshop for people who were caregivers or had parents who had dementia, of like how to spend time with your loved ones. Because I think like these people were coming to see their parents that they had an entire history with of who these people were. But me, I had no idea who they were before they had dementia. So for me, I didn't have anything like any bias in talking to them. They were who they were in front of me, and I had to adapt to who they were in order to get them to open up. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway I got from that is the person you're visiting isn't involved in your past, and to bring your past or their past to the table, to the conversation, you're going to be disappointed. You have to be present with the person who they are then. And people ask me like, I've worked for National Geographic. I've traveled around the world with my stories. Um, like, what's the most like exotic place you've ever been? And I always answer that nursing home, closer to spirit than I did than those 2 months that I got to spend with my friends. And I have a picture of Catherine somewhere here. I can't see it right this minute, but they're with me forever. I loved these people so much, and I love that film so much. It's one of my favorite films. Very fun. Again, I didn't have any connection to them. Like it was not tragic to me that it would be to like a loved one. I mean, it's tragic to see your parent in that situation, but for me, it wasn't because I didn't have an emotional connection to them. I could just truly appreciate them for who they were in the moment and have fun with them and sort of be sort of a coyote with them and a trickster and troublemaker and them, like just me sitting there with them and them not saying anything. And I would just, wait. And then I would press start recording when they'd start talking. So it was a long process, like watching wildlife. I've just been in a fortunate situation where I've been so far able to just make passion films that are more artistic than they are commercial. I mean, obviously there's different levels of success, but I think probably the most watched one would be this Selena and Yolanda, The Secrets Between Them, which is on Peacock, and it's like apparently the most watched series in the doc series in the history of Peacock, which obviously has it's the most watched and the lowest rated of probably Peacock's films. And that's interesting because the reason, and it's for the same reason. The reason why it's most watched is because it was hate binged, because you have an entire community that like hates that Yolanda Saldivar, the person who is responsible for the murder of Selena Quintanilla, was given a platform. So you have the entire, you know, huge army of Selena supporters who just like really hate it. So they watched it because they hated it. And they also like voted it very low. And I'm sure many people voted it very low, even who didn't watch it, just because they hated that we did this. But for me, it's my most successful film, not just because of that, but also because it was like, it's a huge case. It's one of the most contentious trials in American history next to Charles Manson, who I also did. And it was, what I believe was a false narrative. There was a false narrative there. And you have a lot of people who are, Yolanda's up for parole this year in March, this month actually, after serving 30 years for killing Selena Quintanilla. And you have like probably millions of people saying that if she comes out, they themselves are going to kill her. So, there's a lot of hatred towards this woman who I don't feel, I feel was incredibly misrepresented. I feel that she was robbed of being treated as a human. And I don't think the story was fully investigated. I think the press at the time, the journalists really failed. I think the detectives really failed. I think they were looking for a conviction, and then that's what they got instead of really trying to find out what actually happened. And I think we did a great job in the film of giving huge insights into the major gaps of this narrative that's been told over and over again, mostly controlled by the same people. The Manson story, which is, the next one, the most recent one I did, also on Peacock. I mean, that's just like we were told a fake story. We're doing more and more of that, of like re-looking at the stories we've been told that have shaped us so much in our society, and re-looking at these stories and being like, hey, were we actually told the truth about this? And I'm not saying that like the press goes out to lie. I'm saying that there are many factors. An ongoing theme throughout my work, especially focusing on justice, and is that justice um, isn't about truth. Justice is about who is deemed guilty and who is innocent, and that is not based on what is true and what is not as true. So if someone is found guilty in a court of law, it doesn't mean they're guilty. It means that the prosecution did their job and won the the trial war. They gave the better argument because you got a jury, you got a judge, you've got a public defender, and you got a prosecutor, and it really comes down to like who's smarter and who's stupid. And one of the ongoing themes in the injustice that like I uncover and other journalists that I have worked with, like in this beat of things that we uncover, is like, is the justice system in on it? Or is this a conspiracy of criminality? Or is this a conspiracy of stupidity? Is the judge just stupid? Are the jury members just stupid? Is that the right way to see if somebody's guilty by deliberately choosing 12 people that you believe will give you the verdict you want? And it's like, it relies on the fact that like the population is smart enough to make these decisions when they're not. Like we live in a very dumb society. And I say that the way I say it is because, you go through your life, 30 years I've been doing this, where I just see such injustice over and over again. And I wouldn't say that I'm cynical or jaded, but I would say like I have a great like insight into the stupidity of humanity, because I like that's all I do is just focus on these like really crazy stories that there's great tragedies involved, and usually at the center of great tragedy is like unconsciousness and stupidity. In 2013, it was released, I think 2017, and nothing's changed. It's gotten worse. I get literally 10 emails a week from people looking for help because their parents were kidnapped by the medical system in their county for profit. I can counsel. Um, the first thing is there's really no chance you're going to get your parent out. Like that's just, you just have to like come to terms with that. And it might be easier for you knowing that. And so like for these precious moments that you have left with your parent, you don't want them to further isolate you, because that's what they'll try to do. They look for reasons to like make it so you can't even visit. I can't tell you the amount of people that message me saying they're not allowed to visit their parent. So if somebody does and they're just at the beginning of it, I will talk to them right away and saying like, you do not fight them. Like you're not going to win. Some of them, the sociopath, really just like get off on the fact that, you're suffering. And if you show a little bit of blood, they'll peck you to death. Just had one today, and they're my mother. They say my mother has dementia. She doesn't have dementia. My mother keeps asking, "Why am I here? Why am I here?" And then the next question the mother's going to ask is, "How come I can't see my children? How come I can't see my children?" And you don't want to get it to that. It's a horror. It's a full-on horror story happening right now, and it's getting worse. And where my film comes in is that when people are trying to figure out what's happening because they don't know, they've never heard of this, they don't know what's happening, they start Googling, they'll find my film, they'll watch my film, and then at least they'll understand what's happening. Research is like one of the most arduous tasks. I have a whole system now that is involved of making research easier because of the technology we have now with ChatGPT, Notebook LM, all the AI out there that really, what would take you years I can do in a morning now. So I don't have to read everything anymore, because normally what I'd have to do is like, read tons of court transcripts and understand it. Like reading it is one thing, but comprehending what you're reading and getting a bigger picture of it, finding all that stuff, like all that just takes so long. And then then once I learn, start asking questions. Now I don't have to read anything. I can literally just find it all, put it into the machine, the great AI machine, and then I can start asking questions where it's more of a inquiry-based discovery, where it's like I learn based on the questions that I have, and it knows because it reads everything within a minute. So, like right now, I'm researching a story, and I just like find everything I can. I find all the transcripts, all the court cases, put it in, and then the first question is, what's the story about? Second is like, and then I'm like, oh, that's an interesting question. So I go down these rabbit holes with my, artificial intelligent assistant, and it's great. Right? So traveling is when you travel for shooting, and then what I'm talking about is research and learning. about the case, because a lot of these cases have so much information. There's so much you need to learn. But the traveling is, post COVID, the life of a filmmaker has just become so easy because, um, you know, we're not expected to be anywhere. Everything is like this. Everything's online. So, I live in South America, so I can do all my work from here. And then when it comes time to shoot, I just go out and shoot. And now, even with this, like, I would hold all my interviews the way we're doing right now. So I would like hold all my interviews with subjects. So I'd really be making my film just from my desk. I'd edit everything. I'd edit my entire movie. And then with these Zoom interviews, and then I would, once I go shoot, instead of spending 6 hours trying to understand the story while I'm like filming somebody, I already know exactly what I need from that person. So I just like, my 6 hour interviews are now 1 hour of me just getting the stuff that I know that I'm using in my cut. So it's like completely, we weren't using like a Zoom before COVID. Like my first time using Zoom was COVID, uh, was during lockdown. So a lot has changed between the technology that we now have. Like just so much can be done.
Okay. And that's good to know. And then like I'm sure like you said, it sounds like you plan ahead of time and you know exactly what you want to use for, the editing portion.
Yeah, it really saves money. Like, saves money because just even that time on the back end of like for an editor to go through thousands of hours of footage as opposed to let's start with these, where we're not spending money on travel, we're not spending money on crew. It's just me and an editor. We're working together, we're crafting the film together. And you obviously leave time, but that leaves more time on shoot to be more open to find other things and shoot other things and shoot more magically and be freer because you're not like overwhelmed with like, oh, I gotta like find out what's going on. So like the pre-interview has become a big part of the editing process. Well, the reenactment is like, I mean, I don't know who. I think it might have been Errol Morris who. I think that's kind of what made Thin Blue Line so innovative. I'm not like much of a historian when it comes to filmmaking, but I think like it was very controversial at the time when reenactments started because of like documentary is supposed to be journalistic, it's supposed to be real, and so introducing the reenactment was like Bob Dylan picking up the electric guitar. It was like a similar response to it, and now it's become the norm. Reenactment is the norm, and if you don't do reenactment properly, it can come across as like super cheesy, and that really it leans on the skills of the director. For me, I was using the reenactment as a device, uh, so much as a device to have our subject, our protagonist, Joseph Feldman, tell us what was going on, and so like we're in the mind of Joseph Feldman so much that like what you brought up, I'm really glad you brought it up because it's like the thing I'm most proud of is that one line, because there in one line of my other protagonist, which is Feldman's daughter, we saw a reenactment take place without even doing a reenactment. Like in the what a reenactment does is help tell the story. And just in that argument that they were having about whether to have a reenactment or not, because this is a film very much which has a meta angle to it, where it's a documentary about making a documentary. Um, we experienced the same device that a reenactment does just in talking about the reenactment. So like you literally see the hospital room in your head. Like we're able to get the information, and we didn't even talk about what the reenactment was depicting. We just talked about the reenactment, and we got what the reenactment was depicting. So we got the fact that our mystery Uncle Ludwig was taken to the hospital through the discussion of whether we were going to do a reenactment about it or not. And I just thought like that was like I was like, okay, it was like a drop the mic moment. And again, like possibly over a lot of people's heads. Again, this film will probably be seen by a very, 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 very small amount of people, because it's nothing. It's a big film made of a nothing story, and unfortunately, streamers and broadcasters aren't necessarily interested in nothing stories right now, which I think are like Grey Gardens would never be able to be made right now. Like these amazing films that started documentary filmmaking could never be sold right now because I think you have networks that don't they don't necessarily believe in documentary filmmaking as itself. It's more like, oh, let's tell a film about serial killer in the documentary format, as opposed to like, hey, people enjoy documentary films, and I think anybody who would have the opportunity to watch Gold Bars would be highly entertained by it and possibly confused by it, which is okay too. But I think it people don't know what to do with this stuff. Some of these films that I make because they're like, what is it? Like how are you going to sell a film about a bunch of people living in a dementia ward, as opposed to, when you go to an art gallery, you go just to appreciate art. And I think like a lot of that has been lost in filmmaking is like the appreciation of art, of like, here we have this canvas which is like these crew members and people and subjects and ideas and filters and cameras and editing. Like, let's make something that's going to entertain you or capture your imagination for 2 hours. But that's, unfortunately, I feel like that has been somewhat lost. Really about his theories as much it is about, it's a character piece on him. And that's like after a while, because like what you hopefully end up learning is like he doesn't necessarily have it. The theories are very convoluted, right? So it's not about his theories; it's about this obsessive character who is it's my critique on investigation, on like what investigation is. And that's like where a place where a lot of films fail, especially now, is you have a lot of people making investigative films that don't know how to do investigations. And so we're getting a lot of like faux investigation. So we're leaving the experience of watching something thinking that's the truth that we were just told. But for more seasoned investigators, we see through like whether no, this is just a theory. This is not. This is a theory that's being filled in a gap. And so what I'm trying to explain in this film is to show the flaws of investigation when you aren't experienced in doing investigations, which is like a lot of the problems we're in the world right now, and all the things we're polarized on. Um, all the things we're polarized on, it's because it's our lack of critical thinking skills and our inability to investigate on our own. So like I try, and that's where like AI can help us, but AI is also the summation of what we think and what if I ask AI something about anything, it will give me the mainstream response of like, what's the most popular response to this. So even that's dangerous to people using ChatGPT or Google, because you are what you Google, you are what you search, you are your prompts. So if you have a bias that you don't know you have, it's going to be in your question or the way you look into things. And that's the response you're going to get, especially from AI, because all AI does is sort of mirror, unless you give it real information. And like, for instance, like, not to get political here, but like what happened with Zelensky and Trump is like you have the whole world is polarized about that one conversation. You have two incredibly intelligent people that saw two completely different things in that conversation. And depending on what your algorithms are, you're going to get what it is you search for. So if you are, if you are anti-Trump, you're going to get algorithms supporting your anti-Trump bias. If you are pro-Trump, you're going to get in your algorithms a pro-Trump version of it. And you know, and there's a way through that, but it takes a lot of time. But with AI, it doesn't take as long time. Like for instance, like I've been using AI just to like understand more about like what is the polarization around Ukraine and Russia and Trump and Zelensky, et cetera. And so, you know, you take all of the transcripts of everything that's pro-Trump or not necessarily pro-Putin, but maybe anti-Zelensky, or you know, a less biased version of it, and then you take all the anti-Trump, pro-Zelensky, pro-Ukraine, and you put them all, these transcripts, you put them all in Chat GPT, and then the first thing you ask is, what's the pro-Trump version? What's the anti-Trump version? Where do they disconnect? And let's start looking into the disconnections. What's Putin's version? Like that's, I don't know how many people ask that. Like what does Putin say? Like why did he attack Ukraine? Like what are the talking points? And then okay, let's fact check these talking points. Like first one being, you know, the main one is like that Zelensky was, you know, that NATO was expanding. And so there, it opens up this whole rabbit hole. Like, was NATO expanding? Like, we don't know that when we're arguing online. We're just like, sort of just like, we're literally just parroting talking points that we've been fed. And I think what journalism is supposed to be doing is what I'm talking about. And that's also what documentary filmmaking is supposed to be doing. But we don't. We just continue our biases, our ideological bias. And I think that's where AI can help us, even though it has ideological bias itself. If we truly want to get to at least not the truth, but what each person's truth is, we have to like continually question everything. That have taken over those roles, but again, all we're doing, we are just in ideological bias. Any issue, whether it be Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, Russia, like anything going on in the world right now is just like polarization, as opposed to like let's have healthy discourse around this. And so I think we've just been failed by just, we just don't know with this apparatus that we haven't yet figured out how to use it. And even if we do, even those of us that are trying to figure out, it's you know, who do you talk to about it? So I think it's just consciousness. Hopefully we start to evolve. I think AI is going to make us smarter. I truly believe that. It's definitely made me feel smarter about things, and about the way I approach things. But yeah, I mean, if we just keep, I try to keep the positive of things. Like if we just got to keep being diligent. Which is what my point is like, I think we should talk about politics, but make sure that we are, oh, if you are in a position of influence, always be talking about both sides of, you know, because just because you believe something, it's too easy of an answer that the other people believe something else because they're stupid or because they're evil. You know, that's just like, that's not responsible. Is that we've just been told different things. It really comes down to our algorithms, and there were algorithms before there were even algorithms, because there were just there's like, you know, echo chambers, and you know, so it's like it's what we're told, and how, you know, how do we know anything else, what we're told, and how do the people who believe differently than us know anything besides what they're told? And I think like that's what politics should be, is continually analyzing both points of view without judgment, trying to understand each person's point of view. And yeah, I just think that we're missing that, and we're just fighting. We're just like, it's just rage. Your first question you asked me was, you know, how did I get into this journey of filmmaking? And I spoke about Errol Morris and Joe Berlinger. So when I first got the job for making Manson, about like a month in, like having this like unbelievable archive that nobody else has. And the Manson story has been told the same way for 50 years. And nobody else has anything except for like everybody has the same archives of Manson. It's just there's very limited archives of Manson, of these interviews that have been told. And again, what we talk about is like journalists go in with a certain idea of what the story is. And then the way Manson behaves, because he's only got them for an hour, he just perpetuates the myth. And so that's just like the story isn't told. But I had 20 hours of Manson archives, of a conversation with one person that nobody else had. So 20 years of Manson talking. And a month in, I learned that both Errol Morris and Joe Berlinger are both making films about Charles Manson, series about Charles Manson at the same time, that have like way more of a budget than what I had. And obviously that's incredibly intimidating. My two heroes, who continue to be my heroes, they're the best filmmakers in the world, I believe, and I think will continue to be as long as they make films. Are like I'm in the same lane as these guys, like making films, knowing that my film is. I know enough about what they're making that it's like they don't have the story that I have. And now it's coming out in 2 days. Errol Morris's, mine came out a couple months ago, and Errol Morris is coming out. And in the trailer, clearly Errol Morris didn't watch my film, but like he's literally has shots, like he did the same shots that I did, like same technique. I used a record player, and I got Manson's face on the record player, and I used all the characters. I think he may have just done Manson, but he literally has shots in the trailer that are like I have already done them. Like, they're already in my film, which was quite amazing. But yeah, I did a master class with Errol Morris, and I'm like a huge fan. And so I'm very excited in 2 days to watch his take. And it seems like he bought into a little bit into the Manson mythology of mind control, to go full circle and debunk Errol Morris before he even made his film. It will be interesting to see. I posted today. I posted a picture of me and Errol Morris, so his arm around me, and like immediately just started hashtagging Errol Morris, the film, Netflix, Chaos. I mean, his is about the book, Chaos, which was like some big reveal that that Manson was a puppet of the CIA, which will be interesting to watch, which I don't necessarily agree with. Um, but yeah, just like making Manson did very well. It was very successful. It was in the top 10 of all streamers, across the board of all streamers in its opening weekend. So like for just such a small little show, like we were up against all the big guys, and we were in the top 10. And then it had like I think like 100 articles were done on it. I did so much press on it. NBC fully backed it. Peacock, Universal, and Time Magazine did a huge article on it saying it's time we relook at the Manson story. So just being involved in like the historical reshaping of the Manson myth was like for me a huge personal success as far as like what I want to do. And the same thing with the Salino one. And hopefully there'll be more with that. I just got contact. Yolanda's up for parole. I'm getting contacted by press to start doing interviews. I've definitely held the longest interview over the longest amount of time with Yolanda Saldivar, and I have opinions about it. So just the reshaping of history. But back to your point, I'm already, hashtagging making Manson, hashtagging chaos, hashtagging Netflix. So hopefully there's like a resurgence of, more watches to, in 1 year, there's going to be three major retellings of the Manson story. And so hopefully, we'll have these three pieces of work by these like two of the best filmmakers of all time, and me, you know, as this like thing to like look at and be like, wow, this is the year of Manson. I've never been a good marketer, and you know, I've never been in the school of thought of like, let's make a film and see how it does. I mean, I did that at the beginning of my career, but like I wouldn't do it now. I wouldn't I wouldn't even feel comfortable asking money from somebody to make a film that more than likely would not make its money back. You know, that's just the state of filmmaking. The way to make a film is like, you know, you could do a little upfront money with the idea of then going and pitching the networks and pitching the streamers and get them to pay for it, at least to pay for a territory enough to make the film. Then you can sell it outside of that territory. But to, you know, I would say like you need to make films to learn how to make films in order to be in a position where you could pitch uh, the streamers. Like you got to do that. I had to do that. I had to like, you know, most of those films like Here I Am, The Guardians was paid for, but Jesus Town USA was financed. We got that financed, and it was you know, very successful. Uh, and that's how I learned how to make films, which you have to do. And then, you know, try to get them into festivals. So you got all these gatekeepers along the way. But nowadays, like with YouTube, like there are so many filmmakers now that don't actually go to make films anymore because they don't need to. Like, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, there's a different way of storytelling. Like, if I had a choice to watch Netflix or doom scroll, I'll doom scroll because like I learned so much from all of these, you know, all these things that I'm interested in, from Ukraine to Israel, Gaza. Like I'll just scroll and like learn stuff. And these filmmakers, or, you know, like a lack of a better word, influencers or whatever it is they're doing, they have huge audiences. And you don't necessarily need, you know, the gatekeepers anymore. So it's something that's fascinating. Then podcasting, like that's, you know, a whole new world that I'm just sort of diving into, because so many of my films that I don't think I'd be able to sell, but like I could do podcasts about them and it wouldn't take that much except for doing what I'm doing now with you, or do it more narrative, like doing a documentary story. So there are many ways to be storytellers that don't involve 3 years of your life making a film and then trying to sell it. And if I were to give advice to anybody, and it would be responsible advice, I would say learn your craft as a filmmaker for sure. Go to school, learn, or learn on your own, but get a job. Learn a trade, learn something. Do not rely on the entertainment journalist industry. It's very irresponsible, like me. I go to film school, get or like at least make a couple films, then I would stop and I would go to law school and I would learn to be a lawyer and I'd become a good lawyer. If I put the amount of time I put into my film career, I put into like a business or I put into like being a lawyer, I would be I would be extremely rich. And then I would have the money and the skills to go and make a film, which doesn't take that long to make. You can make a film in like, you know, a couple months, 3 months, take some time off work, go make a film. And then if your career takes off as a filmmaker, you don't have to do your other career as much. But yeah, I don't know if that's like good film school advice. Is get a job. I was making films on 35 millimeter film and spending like $100,000 to make a 20-minute short. So so yeah, that was before, you know. And then now you can like, I like literally like you have to convince your DP, but because they always want like the Alexas, they want the big cameras, but literally with an FX3 or an FX30, which is like a $2,000 camera and a really beautiful lens, nobody's going to know the difference except for your DP. And that's, you know, you got to sell it to your DP, um, but you really don't need a lot now to make a movie. You can do it
Oh,
on your iPhone. It's like sometimes some iPhones are better cameras than a lot of nobody knew what to make of Jesus Town because, you know, just to give some context, it was, you know, I found a group of pantomime actors that were pantomiming the the Bible. Like, so like they were like, you had a narrator, a bunch of narrators, and a bunch of like actors pantomiming, pretending to say the words, and they were doing the nativity story. These hardcore Christians. And so, like, it was this unbelievable opportunity to make a documentary about the making of that play that they do, that historical play that they do. But I had actors, or like amateur actors. So I created, with my team, we created a story around, so it's very much just like it was a hybrid documentary that had some scripted parts in it. It seemed scripted, but it wasn't. They were just like, I would just give them, I would just film them in a way. We would just film them in a way. It was like we had two cameras, so like we filmed it as a narrative film. But everything that was there was like what they were going through, and they kind of always just forgot the cameras were there. And it's this quirky film that people did. It did very well. It went on to Netflix. It was, Sky Broadcasting. Like, it was a very successful, financially a successful film for somebody. I'm not sure who. I don't think I saw any money, but that's a whole other story. Um, but but people didn't know what to do with it because nobody had really seen a hybrid film before. It was like the first of its kind, except for like an Orson Welles film, F for Fake, and maybe a couple other like stragglers. But like this was like it was very innovative at the time. Now everybody's doing it. But this was like, I was a little ahead of the curve. We were like 3 years, 4 years ahead of the curve that the documentary community were very upset by it. But it's an amazing movie. I love watching it just to hang out with those guys, and I'm still friends with most of them. And it's such a quirky movie. Just in this area, they've been there for like 100 years,
My
telling the
God.
same story. You used to get the audiences used to be like 250,000 people like in live watching the nativity play, and now it's like they're lucky if they get like 60 people. I mean, I work at home, my family's all here, and there are times where like literally maybe you know if I were just to stay in my obsession, my daughter wouldn't see me even though she's right here. So, and that's not good, right? That's not good. It's about being sustainable. But I mean, that is what film is, right? So film is like these, it's like art, commerce, art, commerce. I forget what the third one is, but it's like, you can't just go make something artistic. It's got to be sellable. Like you're spending money. Like, so it's like you have to balance all of these things. And there's a great book called Slight Edge, I think it's called. And it's just the philosophy of like, like working out. If you commit to doing push-ups every day and you just do like 10 push-ups a day, in a year, you're going to have done so many push-ups and you're going to be in a better place as opposed to, I'm not going to do it today. And I'm not telling you to do 1,000 push-ups. I'm just saying do 10. And so I think it's like just really having that like life work balance. Um, and the old school of like obsessive, like that's great. And you can be successful, but you may be successful in film or you may not be, but you won't be successful in your personal life. And as a family man and as a husband and a father, like I really have to remind myself, because I could just stay here, like this is my office, I could just stay here like all day and I will never get tired. I have like, I think a lot of filmmakers, like we have very obsessive personalities, like whatever spectrum of like the filmmaking spectrum I'm on, like I'm very extreme. But like I have to, I literally have reminders in my phone every 2 hours to drink water because I won't if I don't. Like, because I get so tunnel vision about what I'm doing. So it's just like, you know, I'm not a young man anymore, and I have to like really take care of myself, and I got to take care of my family, and I got to take care of my relationships. So I think a lot of people suffer from that in my industry. I noticed that a lot of filmmakers my age, some filmmakers I've noticed my age are alone, and you know, I see how that happens because you're just chasing the carrot at all times. And that's why, you know, that's why I say like have A business, B business. A business is what you want to do. You want to be a filmmaker. That's fantastic. B business pays the bills, keeps you healthy. You can always get rid of B business. But if you're just on A business and nothing's coming in, and that's the state of the industry right now, you can't just like create a B business. You know, there's not a lot of stuff. There's not is very grim right now. The eroding of trust of the audience, like the trust has been eroded. They they're not necessarily watching good things, and so they just kind of give up on their. I don't know what the numbers in the streamers are, but there's that could be it. I know a lot of people don't go to movie theaters anymore, so there's that, and there's a trickle down effect on there. Uh, there's a surplus. There's so much material out there. Streamers don't need as much stuff anymore. They've got so much. And there's so many people that are making stuff would just give it away if somebody would watch it. Don't film up. At least every theater, like they could just every theater, every Cineplex, something they could just devote one of their screens. But like you would have to prove that, like, you know, filmmakers would have to like really hustle to get those fill up those seats because, or at least like, you know, I don't know. That's a great idea. I know that there are services out there that that you can hire to like exhibit your film in like in theaters, like they coordinate all that stuff. But I imagine it could be more automated, like just, you know, sign up your film, like get subscribers, just start renting out the theater, get subscribers, and like have an ongoing film festival at all time.